So there you are, scrolling through the old internets, and you come across this here recording. Could be any time from 2021 on. The title, or your previous experience with my material, intrigues you enough to click and see what it's all about. Or maybe you stumble on it randomly. Regardless, here you are. Perhaps you will listen to the whole recording. Or maybe you'll click off before it's finished to attend to more pressing issues. Wander off to other videos, podcasts, books. I don't judge. Life is short. No time to waste. Time. And I suppose the only currency that really exists is this thing we call time. Time is money, as they say. It influences our lives in every way. Because of this, things such as hustle culture have become a thing. We believe that we must work harder, longer hours, and fill every moment of our lives with progress, with education, or earning money. We feel guilty if we just sit around and think, or read about things that we don't consider imperative to the advancement of our careers. And I don't mean to survive or be comfortable, but far beyond the needs of a human being. But we believe it will bring happiness. How is that working out for us? Pun intended. Philosophy is merely a love of wisdom, but it comes in many flavors. We scoff at the deep thinkers, and while inventors were once revered, we often roll our eyes at the idea there's anything else left to invent, unless it helps the digital revolution. This mentality has been forced down our throats by corporate America for decades. Work hard. For someone else. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Always move up the ladder. Get your 2-story house with a white picket fence and make sure you have your allotted 2.5 kids, but don't stop there. No time for thought. Things must be bought. Consumerism has reached a fanatical state. And that is not by accident. In short, philosophy is dead, and has been for some time. Because if we dare to think too hard, or too long, we might see how fucked up we really are. While some of us are able to laugh at this absurdity, many others cannot handle pondering too deeply. Just keep moving. Don't think too much. Though we consider ourselves evolved and separate from our ancestors, many of our values and ideas were absorbed from the thinkers through history, and we take this for granted. From the first people to use fire to the builders of the latest quantum computer. And, as well, much of the technology and many of the discoveries we have made through the centuries were taken from those who came before us, the ones who worked the fields, invented the machines. Nobody today invents anything alone. Whether it is the components of the creation, the computer programming, or just the type of alloy used to build something, it is all based on prior inventions. We work together, even with those who have been dead for centuries. And though it started as a slow process, the Industrial Revolution gave us new promise for easier lives and a better future for all. Time-saving and labor-saving devices were supposed to help ease the burden on the average person and give us more free time to enjoy ourselves and raise our families, to live life, and it has. And these promises of amazing new technologies that would help us lead better lives was always in our ancestors' minds, the hope that if their generation just worked a little harder, a few more hours, maybe their children would have an easier run of it. But that turned out not to be true. Quite the opposite, actually. It was possible, and still is, but we need to grow up. It's not because we do not have the technology, nor the ability. It's because of the fact that most of the inventions made by average people, with no understanding on how to patent or protect their own creations, which end up being sold to larger multinational corporations that can exploit the technology, make sure it's hoarded under intellectual property rights, and then charge what they choose, regardless of the benefit or lack thereof to mankind. This is a waste of our collective time. If you've ever looked at the scale of pharmaceutical prices, you'll find that the more a life-saving drug is, the more expensive it is, regardless of the cost to produce. And just as individuals sell out to larger corporations to avoid the trouble of filing patents and producing products, our own governments have subsidized all kinds of new inventions and pharmaceuticals for decades. Instead of the public reaping the rewards of the money that we have put into the research, the products are quickly hoarded by those companies, and they are allowed to charge whatever they choose, or, rather, whatever people will pay. And when your life is on the line, you will pay whatever it takes. How many hours does one have to work to pay for one round of treatment of cancer? Let's not do the math. Even if we have insurance, consider the cost for that alone over your lifetime. How many hours do you work in order to have the illusion of being safe and protected when there's an illness in the family? And when something happens, a true emergency, do you feel confident that your insurance will even pay out? Or do you fear they will try to gouge you and find an excuse not to fulfill their obligations? Does it have to be this way? The issues seem too complex to analyze, so we will just go along with the system we inhabit without question. Just as many inventors never get credit for their inventions, many of the discoveries in the medical field, whether drugs or devices, are also locked up under copyright and intellectual property. Even the vaccine producers for the current epidemic have been funded, in part, by governments and subsidies. And though profit is a motive for any company, there are darker components to the issue which keep the playing field unbalanced. Patent protection on these drugs mean that other nations are not allowed to share the recipe, forcing them into buying from one manufacturer, which sets the prices. If millions die, that is just business. To answer a previous question I asked, no, it does not have to be this way. In 1955, when Jonas Salk invented the polio vaccine, he was asked by the media, well, who owns the vaccine? And his response was, well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun? He mentioned that donations to the March of Dimes had supported the research, and it would not be right to own it, and he was correct. Even lawyers from the organization itself, the March of Dimes, pursued a way to patent it, but because of Salk's reluctance, they did not pursue it further. The reason this case stands out is because it is considered an anomaly. He is given credit for being so human, yet, do we see this anywhere else today? Where are the modern Jonas Salks? Where are the returns on investment that we, as a society, have paid for already? And who continue to repurpose drugs as new, just to keep others from making a more affordable version? To keep generics out of the market because it might cut into profits. Profits. Think about that for a minute. Not making a living or earning income or helping your family, but profits, which are usually far beyond the value of what these companies are actually producing. And not to focus too much on one aspect, but much of the funding for research has always been paid by your own tax dollars. And for older drugs, for which the patent is expired, repurposing them as new drugs allows them to keep the prices high, even when manufacturing costs are near zero. Consider the latest medicine, Molnupiravir. The media has been touting it as a wonder drug for COVID, after it came out of nowhere. All of a sudden there's a miracle cure for the pandemic. But when you dig deeper, you find out this particular drug is being sold at $712 per course, which is a 5-day at 2 pills per day course. This comes out to over $71 per pill. Per pill. And compared to some of the other more controversial pharmaceuticals that people claim can help with the illness, which have been priced at around 50 cents per dose, you can see why the fancy new drug is always being promoted first. But do we have enough evidence that any of them really work at all? Who knows? But so long as the money is flowing, few questions are asked, and fewer are answered. This is why capitalism is killing us. Not because people make money, but because we hoard ideas and omit those facts which we may not agree with and which may not agree with us. Shareholders hold all the cards. But patent is the protection that keeps things like insulin increasing in price in the U.S., while decreasing elsewhere around the world. Remember the molnupiravir that I mentioned cost $712 per course of treatment? Well, Merck made sure to let people know that they will be making it at an affordable price for those countries that may not be able to afford that price tag. Their price? $12 per course of treatment. Let me repeat that. Some countries will be paying $12 for a course of treatment, and in the United States it will cost us $712. I have a hard time believing that a patent protection is really the issue here. And once again, I have to mention that tax dollars and the Department of Defense funded the research. Those are your work hours in action for private institutions to profit. In the USA, people will be paying 59 times more for the same drug, which is still profitable even at the lowest cost. The fact that so few people are not aware of patent trolls tells me I should mention it here. It's worth looking into the reason people just give up instead of sharing amazing inventions. The wealthy can patent something that does not exist yet and hang on to it until another inventor creates something like it, then swoop in and sue him. It's a crazy world out there. The point I'm trying to make here is that while a hard-working citizen stresses over how to pay a $700 per pill regimen for their cancer, or why their insulin tripled in price, those same companies are reaping rewards in the billions, multi-million-dollar bonuses to the representatives who can sell the most OxyContin to the pill mills, or convince people that a new Alzheimer's drug is safe. Side note, it isn't. When it's been shown to be useless with horrendous side effects. It happens every day, and nobody is ever held accountable. While citizens can go to jail for a joint, the whitecoats can kill thousands and just apologize with a small fine. They are protected. You are not. Because to them, your time is theirs. Your time is meaningless because you're not on the top of the false meritocracy. You are told that if you want to be successful, you just have to try harder. But the barriers to entry have become so convoluted that the greatest minds in our society often have no choice but to sell their ideas to others, to be exploited. Many have just given up. Working for someone else seems to be the safest bet, so we take it. And all of this brings me back to time. Something so misunderstood in my opinion. It is time to think that helps us process and understand our lives. It is time for vacations and trips that allow us to see the world with a new light and refresh our minds. It is time for friends and family that creates bonds and gives us true pleasure in life. Because just living is not good enough. We can keep our minds busy and pretend that seeing each other for an hour a day is sufficient, or that working overtime to make more money will make us better off in the long run, and sometimes it might. But deep down inside, I truly believe that if we all share anything, we share a common thread when it comes to our needs and desires. For one thing, we want to work. The idea that people are lazy by nature is nonsense. Most people want to stay busy, explore, and learn new things, but we live in a society that frowns upon taking risks, while at the same time praising those who did and succeeded. People are frozen and don't know what to do. We don't know how to live our lives, so we spend our time the same as every other human. We follow because others lead. And there is nothing wrong with that, so long as our leaders are also philosophers. And it's been a very long time since that were the case, if ever. There are no more philosopher kings. There is no respect for thinkers, no time to ponder, unless it's producing financial incentives. This kind of reasoning is how we got into this mess. And the way out is to acknowledge that we are no longer supporting our society and neighbors, but rather multinational corporations and facade governments, which have no interest in the betterment of humanity. Profit has always come first for them. Shareholders own the only real stake. And the population defends it, not realizing that while they may benefit in some ways, they are losing much more for their children and their future. What we sacrifice now can never be mended, because once power is given up, it is very rarely returned. And we have a lot more power in numbers than people realize. I don't see how this can work in the long term. Listening to people defend capitalism while others demand socialism makes my head spin, because we will never have either one. All systems are complex, but the problems with capitalism are not just money. It is our worship of it. The fancy cars, the bigger house, the Gucci purse. If this is what people want to spend their time on, they are free to do so. Because when it comes to wants, we pay what the market demands. If someone wishes to own a $10,000 pair of jeans, they are free to do so. I may think it's stupid, but it's not my life. Go for it. But when we talk about quality of life, such as medicine, my opinion changes instantly. We must demand fair prices on life-saving drugs, because we all pay for them in one way or another. They give the excuse that nobody will innovate without the incentive of being rich, and that's just bullshit. The wealthy can pass down money from one generation to the next, and they always will. But what could your grandfather pass down? Or his grandfather? Labor? Inventions? How do we inherit effort and the efforts of those who came before us? What of all the citizens who risked their lives building the dams, the highways, and the factories that we all enjoy now? How many lives were lost and hours wasted to create this nation for all of us? What of my father who fought in Vietnam and his father who fought in World War II? What are the rewards for those who contribute to society if they are hoarded by others who do no real work? Consider the wealthy banker. Where does he get all that money? Well, it's yours, of course. This same principle applies to many situations right now, but we dare mention it. The term socialist is thrown around and everyone laughs, because we have been convinced that it's the way things are, and the way that they will always be. But I don't believe it. Not for a second. And why do we not demand some of these things are shared equally among the descendants of the people living today? Do we deserve anything merely for being born in this country? Well, that depends. I don't expect anything for free. I'm willing to work for what I have, and I love doing a good job on things I put my mind to. And I see no problem with people becoming wealthy if they're lucky enough to find a way. But my issue is with the bureaucracy and regulations that keep the small guy out of the arena while the big dogs run wild. Our time is precious, and what we choose to do with it will vary. But whatever we do with our time, one thing cannot be overlooked. We need time to think. Not on the couch watching television or hanging out with friends, but actual time to process our lives. Not just for our sake, not even for our children. It's important, but if we think too long, we might actually see the mess we're in. We must stand up for those who came before us, the trailblazers and risk-takers who worked long nights in dangerous conditions, because quite often they did so for the betterment of society. They took their own time, their own lives, to improve the world around them by creating or discovering something new and amazing. And every time there was somebody else standing there, ready to either buy, take, or steal the idea for their own, and drowned out by thousands of rambling lawyers, the real inventor is left to fend for himself. And this happens so often that we still believe that Edison invented the light bulb. It's a great example. Edison did not invent them, nor hold the first patent. Bulbs were used 50 years prior, but the fact he had the name meant he got the credit. There are thousands of stories like that out there, most of which we will probably never know. There are the givers, and there are the takers. My point is that even though we have created labor-saving devices and medicines, we are still working the same amount of hours. We are still trying to just get by as a nation. We still see our taxes wasted on projects that we pay for twice. And all of this costs us time. Time that could be spent living our lives. Under every blue collar is a red-blooded human being, and even though we know it, we fail to live up to what we really desire, for fear of not working hard enough. So where do we go from here? You tell me. I've already spent enough time on this. Now I need to feel guilty about not doing something more productive. Thanks for listening. I hope so you got something out of this podcast, and I appreciate you taking your time to spend with me. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take some time to think. Every day. Never fear what you may find, as it will most likely be liberating. On a side note, before I go, since my videos and podcasts are often not considered advertiser-friendly, I rely on support from my patrons. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon, where I post blogs and extra videos. For even $1 a month, you'll have access to extra content, including many videos, blogs, and stories that I upload. So take care out there. Stand up for what you feel is right, unconditionally. My time here is now at a close. Thanks for spending a little of yours with me. Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo. Yeah.